Let's start by taking a look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which were adopted by the UN in the year 2015 after the Millennium Development Goals, and we are supposed to achieve them by 2030. These are absolutely vital for the planet. I mean, they both have an ecological point of view as well as an economic point of view. But the point is that as we continue to move on towards these SDGs, we are beginning to see that the Global South is lagging behind. And the biggest issue that keeps us, the Global South, from achieving these goals, the entire Global South, is that it lacks finance. And that amount is now moved up to, in the words of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, $4 trillion is urgently needed. That's a huge amount. That's exactly the size of the Indian economy currently. $4 trillion is currently needed to try and get the Global South to catch up and actually try and meet those very vital Sustainable Development Goals, to accelerate the progress on the SDGs. Those $4 trillion are absolutely essential. It's a big financing gap. Now, we need to understand that she's taken these figures from UNCTAD. And UNCTAD's developing countries have got, according to them, they said that the developing countries have got $544 billion in FDI in 2022. That is woefully low, actually. The SDGs in developing economies are stagnating as a result of that. The SDGs are, in fact, even regressing in some parts of the world. And that's not a good sign, because at the end of the day, that's really a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots is going to be created, and it's going to have an ecological imbalance as well. The Global South is affected, as we can presume, disproportionately, and there is pressure now on multilateral development banks like the World Bank and the IMF, and they have to do much more. They have to do much more in terms of giving, to finance this kind of a gap. But do they have the ability to do it? We know that these 17 SDGs, they are significant SDGs. Among them is, of course, halving global poverty, ending poverty, hunger, bringing about gender equity. All these things are extremely important, and we can see that the Global South, as we said, is affected disproportionately. There has been pressure on the World Bank and the IMF to try and improve their positions. And we do know that unless this $4 trillion is got from somewhere, the Global South is going to be moving backwards. In a sense, they're going to regress rather than progress, to be progressive. And we have with us Anil Padmanabhan, a senior economic journalist, who's going to throw light on some of these subjects with us. Thanks very much, Mr. Padmanabhan, for being with us. Let me first start by asking you, do you see the problem of the finance gap for the SDGs in the Global South being addressed on a priority?
Mark, unfortunately, it's a very short answer. It's no. And we must understand the magnitude of the challenge facing the Global South. First of all, your viewers should, I presume, know that 88% of the world's population, which is about nearly 6 billion, reside in the South. And the median age of this Global South is 25 years compared to the global average of 30 years. So you have the largest population and the youngest population residing in the Global South. So this kind of shortage of financial resources to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals is a huge challenge. In 2014, UNCTAD had estimated that this would be about 2 trillion. But with the onset of COVID and the triple crisis that the world faced, finance, food, and exchange rates, the cost has grown to something like 4.3 trillion, which is what the finance minister talked about. Now, where are these resources going to come from? They have to come primarily from the developed world. And they have not signaled any indication that they are willing to release these kind of funds. So I don't see going forward that these funds will come the way of the Global South, which means in the next 6 years, they are facing an uphill task in realizing these SDG goals.
But Mr. Padmanabhan, could trade be the solution rather than aid?
Unfortunately, no, Mark, because the problem is that the same West, which we are looking to, in terms of resources, are the same segment or the cohort which has strangled global trade. at this point of time. Look at the World Trade Organization. It's basically in limbo, and which is forcing countries to get into bilateral or mini lateral agreements to create trade blocs, because the World Trade Organization is unable to get all the trading countries on the same table, as it were, to negotiate some forward looking trade agreements which could be equitable and help the global south. Secondly, most of the global south doesn't have the means to compete in global trade. So, which becomes a big challenge because they don't have the technology, they don't have the manufacturing capability, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the skilled manpower. Plus, they've got basic health challenges, deficits, which become part of the SDG. So, given all this, it becomes very difficult for them to compete, even if fair trade was allowed. So, given that the WTO is in shambles and that their inability to compete, I don't see trade as a solution.
Also, Mr. Padmanabhan, how best can multilateral development banks and institutions come to the rescue?
See, Mark, ideally they should. Historically, in the past, they have always been there to bail countries out of crisis. But the institutions do not possess the capital base to address the financial needs of the new era, as it were. See, you're looking at the 80s, 90s, up to which point these multilateral banks had the balance sheet to lend money or to provide emergency resources. Today, their capacity is extremely restricted because the needs of the world have grown. So I don't see the multilateral institutions playing a larger role than what they're playing at present. So they'll continue to play an important role, but it can't be the sole uh, entity which is going to be able to carry the load, as it were.
Absolutely. So those funds have to come from somewhere.